The Walking Dead Season 7 will premiere on AMC on August 22nd. Before Season 11 starts, I would like to go over my personal rankings of the 10 seasons that have already been released. Before I get into my rankings, please remember to like and subscribe and follow DM Reviews on Twitter. Link should be in the description. Also, don't forget to check out Demerit Commissions in the Discord server below for great thumbnails, profile pictures, film backgrounds, and so much more. A warning that this video will contain spoilers for the first 10 seasons of The Walking Dead, but it will contain no spoilers for the 11th season or the spin-offs or the graphic novels. In this video, I'm going to go from worst to best in my rankings. So at number 10, my personal least favorite season of the show, I have Season 8. This season is largely considered to be one of the worst seasons of the show, and I think it is very warranted. I've talked about this season and Season 7 in a previous video on the channel, which I'm sure you can find it just scrolling through the videos, or we have a playlist for all the Walking Dead videos, so you can find it there too. But as I discussed, my main problem with this season is that it is too reliant on action. Every 20 minutes there's an action scene with like 20 people involved, and only 3 of them have names and have actually been in past episodes. In past seasons, when they had action scenes, it was with characters we care about, and there were very few of them, so they were much more exciting, because this was like, you knew you weren't going to get a big action scene like this for another season. Also, the stakes were much clearer in those scenes. So many times we just switch to an action scene where we don't know why these people are fighting. If you're going to have an action-heavy scene in a drama horror series, then you have to have characters who we care about dying in like every other episode, and you have to make the stakes very clear, which leads to additional drama. One of the most controversial parts about this season is Carl's death. I'm actually a fan of this decision. It demonstrated that no character is plot armor, and that any character can die at any moment. What upset me about this is the way they did it. Having him get taken out while saving somebody isn't a bad idea, and it allowed him to have emotional goodbyes with every character they wanted him to have one with. The problem is, though, that his death could have and should have also had a larger emotional impact on Negan. Imagine if when Carl met Sadiq, some saviors came after them. Then a bunch of walker came because they heard the gunshots, so they like threw them at Sadiq and Carl, and then one of them like shot Carl in the leg, so he got bit from a walker, but he was then still able to escape with Sadiq. Then everything else could stay the same. But then in Carl's letter to Negan, he wrote what happened and told him like that he has to get his people in order and just realize the people he's with and what he's making them do. That would have been much more heartbreaking, and would have furthered the tension between Rick and Negan. I'm not going to talk any more about Season 8 since I've already talked about it extensively in my past videos, so if you want to hear more about that and how I would fix this season and Season 7, then make sure to go check out that video. So at number 9, I have Season 7. I also talked about this one in my past video, so I'm just going to give like a few quick thoughts on it. So it's my second least favorite season, but I would not call it bad. In fact, it's a great season of television. My problem with the season, and something that's even more prevalent in Season 8, is that the Savior arc was stretched out to 2 seasons, and they just don't have the material for that. There are plenty of great episodes, they're just few and far between. The premiere of this season is one of my favorite episodes of the whole show, and there are plenty of other great episodes. It's just there are a lot of filler episodes which aren't handled particularly well. When they have the material for a full episode, they usually handle it well. The problem is that there's so many episodes that could have just been like the little scene before like the title sequence, and instead they stretched that out for an entire episode. So while there's definitely some positives to that, because you get to spend more time with the characters, it just doesn't. They didn't handle that well. Like they didn't make the character part even entertaining, which it definitely hurts it. Season 7 does have some great drama, and I'm happy to see that the show was willing to have an entire season devoted to like breaking our characters down, and in turn also the viewer. And if Season 8 was better, then I feel I would think about this season as one of the best seasons of the show. Like, there's so much good here, and it was just, the season was so reliant on the payoff that was supposed to come in Season 8. And since Season 8 really fails at that, it makes it so much more difficult to watch the season, because you're never really going to get the full payoff that you are sort of like reliant on while watching the season. I really love the finale of the season. I mean, the moment when Ezekiel like comes into Alexandria and he like yells, "Alexandria will not fall, not on this day." To this day, that moment still gives me goosebumps, and it always makes me smile. And this is another example of when they have story to tell, they do a good job. Just so often they don't have much story to tell, but they still do an entire episode on it, and they really falter in that regard, especially in this season. So at number 8, I have Season 10. Season 10 is a very mixed bag for me. The season is not at all disappointing, although there are disappointing aspects. Firstly, I really liked episode 16, which was the one that we had to wait like almost like half a year for, even more actually. But it still felt a tad disappointing, and that is because they spent months telling us about how it was going to be this huge episode with a huge battle, and that didn't really happen. It doesn't make it a bad episode. This is more of a critique of like the marketing. Like I remember Norman Reedus once said like this was gonna have a huge battle, like on par with like Game of Thrones and stuff like that, but there's barely a battle in this episode. It's just a lot of them just sneaking through a horde, which is entertaining. Just I was kept expecting like this huge battle between them and the Whisperers, like hand to hand or something, and that never really came. The thing that bothered me most about the episode is that there weren't any big deaths of the protagonists. Firstly, I wish Gabriel died defending everybody, since it would have been a great conclusion to his arc. He started off as somebody who was too much of a coward to save his community, and then he would finish being the hero who dies to save his community. Then I would have wanted Connie as a walker to be a part of the horde, and since she was deaf, she wouldn't have gone with the walkers when they played that really loud music. And then maybe Daryl would have to put her down. I think it would be. I'm very curious to know if you are a deaf walker, do you just not hear sound? Like, what do they do? Like, do they just kind of wander around until they see something in front of them? But that is definitely something that they probably will never explore. But that would have been very interesting to see, like Daryl would have. It could have been very interesting, or they could have or they could have maybe done where she is bit but she's still alive, so then Daryl has to have like an emotional goodbye with her. Lastly, I wish like maybe Jules would have died when so like when Daryl said that they wouldn't all make it through, we would look at back at it as pretty heavy foreshadowing. So instead of only Beatrice dying, and she's barely in the show. They added on 6 additional episodes to the season, and overall I was disappointed by them. I loved one more, the Aaron and Gabriel episodes, and I adore Tears Negan, and it is easily my favorite episode of season 10, and one of my favorite episodes of the entire show. The rest disappointed me, especially Find Me. I love the idea of giving Daryl a love interest, especially like outside of Carol, because I'm personally not really a big fan of that idea. However, the execution really disappointed me. Splinter, the Commonwealth episode, barely advanced the plot, and same with Home Sweet Home. That is my real problem with these episodes. They're all filler and they don't advance the plot. I understand why that is, because they definitely had restrictions in terms of filming. But many of these episodes didn't take advantage of this, kind of like what I was talking about with season 7, where they have an opportunity to take a deep dive into these characters and they don't do it particularly well. I really like the Whisperers. There were a few missed opportunities to have like a lot of horror moments, but Alpha and Beta were still like great characters, and they both had very unique and great death scenes. One of my main problems with the season was that it never felt like any character could die at any moment. The Walking Dead hasn't really had it in years, even though they've had like Michonne leave, Rick leave, Maggie leave, Carl die, and Glenn died only a few seasons ago, and they should have done a better job of figuring out a way to make it feel like any character could die at any moment. And I understand that a lot of these characters either came back or are going off to spin-offs, but they could have at least killed off one of like Michonne, Rick, and Maggie, just so you'd feel like really these are main characters. And if you also had Carl die recently, then it could really feel like anybody can die at any moment. But this season is definitely where this problem was most noticeable. Like I never felt that. Obviously certain characters can't die because they've announced spin-offs, but there are certain characters who don't have any announced spin-offs, and it never really felt like they were at any sort of risk. My 7th favorite season of The Walking Dead is season 6. Season 6 really has 2 parts. The first part is dealing with the massive walker horde, and the second one is introducing the Hilltop and the Saviors. I enjoyed the second half much more than the first half. In the first half, there were plenty of filler episodes, and there were so many meaningless, gory death scenes of side characters that have absolutely no emotional effect on the viewer, or at least not really one on me. What I loved about the second half of the season is that it really made you question if our group are the good guys. When they kill a ton of people in their sleep, it really makes you wonder which is something that I really like when the show does, and I wish they did more. Our group are anti-heroes. They're not superheroes, or just heroes, so I like when they make that abundantly clear. Like everybody, I love No Way Out, and the Morgan-centered episode, which explained why he doesn't want to kill anymore. They're both really great episodes, and probably the 2 best of the season. The only one that can compare is the one I was talking about before, where they kill all the saviors for the first time. I also really hated Glenn's fake death. How on earth did he survive that? Did none of the walkers see his head or feet or his stomach under Nicholas? It also made no sense to do it, since they were going to kill him off soon enough regardless, so fake killing him now makes no sense, and knowing that he only dies a few weeks later in the show's time makes his return feel like cheap and meaningless. The finale of this season was the first episode of the show that I would call bad. Nothing happened. They just drove around, and both sides had opportunities to do exactly what they wanted to do, and they didn't take that chance for no clear reason. I also talked about this at length in my last video, but the cliffhanger could have been handled far better. If they showed that Negan killed Abraham and then cut to black, then you hadn't spent the last 8 months emotionally preparing yourself for a big death, Glenn's death would have hurt even more. But I do like that they killed off two people at once just to kind of subvert expectations, but that's more on season 7 in this one. At number 6, I have season 9. Angela King saved this show with this season. As you can tell, I was not a fan of season 7 and 8, especially 8, and season 6 was also a huge step down from the earlier seasons, and against all odds, she made a fantastic season, with her first season as the showrunner. Even though she had to deal with Rick and Maggie leaving, she still made a great season. Firstly, this season has 3 of my favorite episodes from the entire show. Firstly, episode 5, What Comes After, Rick's final episode. This entire episode was great, and the only thing that would have made it better is if, instead of having Sasha appear for whatever reason, they had Glenn or Carl appear instead. It would have made much more sense, and it would have been much more emotionally impactful, because Sasha did not have this huge impact on Rick, unlike his son Carl and Glenn, who was saved him at the beginning, and they had known each other for a while. Rick's final scene with everyone trying to save him on the bridge is one of, if not my favorite scene in any TV show. It is super emotional, it's perfectly acted, the score is great, and I hope they bring it back for the movies, and the script is also perfect. Another great episode in this season, which I also think might be the show's most underrated episode, is episode 13, Choke Point. I love this episode for the great fight scenes, particularly Daryl versus Beta. The fight scene is one of my favorites in the show's history, and there are plenty of other great ones in the episode as well. I also love the brewing romance between Daryl and Connie, and I hope they explore it further in season 11. The last season in this episode that stands out to me as one of the best in the show's history is episode 15, The Calm Before. The Pike scene is easily one of my favorite scenes in the show's history, and I love that they use the same music as when Rick was exploring the ruins of his hometown back in the pilot, since they both represent similar emotions in this character. Similar moments for the characters. They were both kind of realizing that something bad was happening, but they didn't realize exactly how bad it was, because right here it was they didn't realize that the Whisperers controlling their lives as much as they really were, and with Rick he didn't realize that they were walkers, and he just realized that something bad happened, but he didn't realize that people were now eating each other. In this season they introduced the Whisperers, and I love their introduction. I love the scenes in the cemetery and the way they found creative ways to use horror with their introduction, and as I discussed, I wish they continued to use that in season 10. I have 2 really big problems with this season. The first one is that there are a lot of filler episodes, and although they are handled well for the most part, they still could have done a better job at giving more story to each episode. There were many great episodes. There were just many episodes where nothing would happen, and then the moment you were excited for from the trailer from the last week comes at the very end, so you have to wait yet another week to see something exciting. My second problem with the season is how political it is. There were so many scenes that were just boring political discussions, and many of them didn't even advance the story, and they didn't have much of an effect on the characters involved. Outside of that, though, it's a great season, and I really have to praise Angela King for what she was able to do. Now that I am getting into the top 5, I just want to say that the next 4 are not too far apart from each other, and I really adore all 5, and 3 through 5 are all at similar levels, and even 2 through 5 are all really. Then my favorite season separates itself, but I'll talk about that one later. So at number 5, I have season 2. Season 2 gets a lot of hate for being set on a farm for the most part, and many episodes don't have much going on in them. There are episodes where this bothered me. The one where this is the most problem is episode 4, Chupacabra. There are great aspects to this episode, but there are very few plot lines that clearly only exist because they don't have enough of a storyline to go on. I also really like that they had the guts to spend so much time searching for Sophia and then reveal that she had been dead the whole time. They maybe should have shortened the amount of time they spent looking for her because it felt a little tedious to keep looking for her, and it was very repetitive, but I still enjoyed that they were willing to do this. The aspect that I love most about the season is how well they handled character drama. This season, along with season 3, certainly did the best job at handling group debates, especially the scenes where Dale is trying to convince the group to allow Randall to live. These scenes did a great job at establishing what you have to do now, and they are even more fascinating to watch now since you can see that what the group is going to do now is basically what Shane was saying. Speaking of Shane, his descent into madness makes for one of the best villains the show has ever done. John Bernthal has brought so much to the character, and I love that the show wasn't afraid to justify what he was doing to an extent, especially now. His death scene was also handled very well, and it was acted perfectly by Andrew Lincoln and Bernthal. I also love the final episode of the season. And the "this isn't a democracy anymore" speech is easily one of the show's most iconic moments, and it definitely deserves that status. I forgot to mention this, but I know a lot of people aren't fans of the Randall storyline, but I really liked it because of the reasons I said. It did a great job at establishing like where everybody is at the moment and just showing how far these people have lost their humanity. Because right now the idea of just killing a guy seems crazy to us, but then you're realizing that they've only been in the apocalypse for like 3 months. You're thinking like, if I've been in the apocalypse for 3 months, would I be on Shane's side or Dale's side? And they did a really good job of making you think about that, which the show's for the most part always done a good job at. But they've definitely lost that in more recent seasons. But that's just because after like 10 years in the apocalypse, it's starting to get a little more realistic that they'd be willing to do some of the stuff they do now. So I can't really blame that on them. It's just something that was bound to happen. And number 4, I have season 4. Season 4 is really split up into 3 parts. The first part has the flu storyline, and the second part wraps up the governor arc. The third part is filled with self-contained stories of our characters traveling to Terminus in separate groups. The first part of the season is easily my least favorite. All of the episodes work really well individually, but my main problem is that none of the characters we care about die. I'm a fan of Sasha as a character, but I would have liked if they killed her from the flu. Then the storyline would be better in rewatches, since the stakes would feel real. Since all of the other people who live at the prison, except for those who we care about, die in the bus after the governor's assault, all of their deaths aren't meaningful since they would have most likely died anyway. Most people were not a fan of the 2 governor flashback episodes, but I was. They were a very effective way to explore the character even more, and they also did a great job of making the character more sympathetic. And I loved how when Too Far Gone, they reminded us of how really evil he is. Speaking of Too Far Gone, it is easily one of my favorite episodes from the entire show. The episode proves that The Walking Dead knows how to handle an action episode, which makes Season 8's failure at this even more startling. Then, the final part of the season was filled with character deep dives and really explored the ins and outs of living in the zombie apocalypse. Those episodes are my favorite ones from the season. The ones that only focus on a few characters, like The Grove, which is my second favorite of the season behind Too Far Gone. And also like Still, that also focused on it. And I also really like the introductions of many new characters like Tara, Bob, Abraham, Rosita, and Eugene. And number 3, I have Season 1. Season 1 launched a massive universe filled with a main show which has 11 seasons, 10 announced seasons of pre-existing spin-offs, many webisodes, 2 more announced spin-offs, an after show, a trilogy of movies, and I'm sure it extended the comics life, and I'm sure even more spin-offs that haven't been announced yet. It is a 6-episode drama masterpiece which focuses on Officer Rick Grimes trying to find his family after waking up from a coma into the zombie apocalypse. I love all the casting decisions for this season, and they brilliantly laid the groundwork for a huge franchise. Easily one of the most heartwarming scenes in the entire show is Rick reuniting with Carl and Lori, and it works so well because they have such great characters, and they are acted so well. Chandler Riggs is so good in this season, and the actor must have been like 8 or 9 when doing this. It's very impressive how great of an actor he already was. It is also kind of heartbreaking for Shane because of all the humanity John Bernthal brings to the role, and because they soon show you that Rain was being so selfless when he saved Carl and Lori, and that he really had no romantic intentions with Lori. He really was just doing this to be a good person. Also, Days Gone By is one of my favorite pilots from any TV show. It is so chilling, and it is a great opener to this series. My only problems with the season is that I wish they were more original with Rick waking up from the coma post-apocalypse. It was mostly the same thing as we've seen in like 28 Days Later, so while they did it really well, I wish they put more originality into it. My other problem was that when they introduced us to the camp, there were many extras who we don't know, and we're led to believe that they all died during the attack on the camp. My problem is that when you see these nameless faces, it takes away from like the closeness and care that you want us to feel with these people. They wanted you to feel close with these characters, so adding no-name extras doesn't help. Outside of those 2 problems, the season is really incredible, and it does a great job at hooking viewers in, especially with the pilot. My second favorite season of the show is Season 5. Season 5 might have my favorite tone of the entire series. I love that feeling of desperation the group had, especially Michonne, to like find a place to just be. The season also has what might be my favorite premiere of the show's history, No Sanctuary. This episode has it all. Great character moments, great action, interesting characters, and above all, we get to see Carol and Daryl reunite, and we also get to see Rick and Carl reunite with Judith, which were both great moments. I also really loved every episode in this season. They all have such a great feeling of desperation, whether it be to find a place to live, to get to DC, or revolving around Beth. Speaking of Beth, I don't love her episodes as much as the other ones, but they're still really good, and I would be very interested to get an episode of Tales of the Walking Dead, which focuses on what happens to them after Beth and Dawn died. Really quick, if you want to hear more episodes of Tales of the Walking Dead I'd want to see, make sure to check out the video which is on the channel, which I'm sure you can find in the Walking Dead playlist. It was kind of a curious decision to spend so much time looking for Beth and to just have this episode end with Beth dying, but I love that the show was so willing to subvert expectations like that, especially and this was also what I was talking about with Sophia dying at the end of her episodes. And then once you think they're done, then they kill off Tyrese, and which I also love, showing again they're so willing to subvert expectations, and I wish they would still be willing to do that, just kill off two characters just out of nowhere. Later seasons never quite figure out how to handle this, they never figure out how to handle safe communities. This season did a great job, but none of the later seasons figure out how to do that. Later season they never figure out how to, and then once they started introducing more communities in the later seasons, they had a hard time handling the distance between the characters, and they still have this problem to this day. The only season that did a somewhat decent job at it was season 7, but even that season had moments where they did a frustratingly lackluster job at this. I really enjoyed watching all the skepticism from some characters, to be safe in this community. The only they were very worried about just joining into this community, and I love that the arguments that they stem from this, and they really showed you how desperate certain characters are, but other characters are much more content with just living on the road. So then my favorite season of the show, and my favorite season of probably any TV show, is season 3. Season 3 is the closest thing to a perfect season of television I've ever seen that isn't 2 episodes. It really is so good. I love that we had a small group filled with great characters we know. Each death had an added impact since we knew that we now had one less capable fighter, and that really meant something since they only had 6 or 7. And especially with the looming threat of the governor, you knew that they were going to need all of them. I love that it felt like you were a part of this group, and they achieved that since they had such great characters and great relationships. It felt like you could know them since they felt like real people. In this season, we are introduced to the governor, and wow, David Morrissey is so great as this character. He brings so much depth and humanity to this character, and I really loved him. My favorite episode in this season is probably episode 4, Killer Within. The episode is so heartbreaking, and I love that they were so willing to call 2 characters just like that. I was never a big fan of Lori, but her death scene hits hard because it is written and acted so well. They really make you care for her. Same with Andrea. I wasn't a fan of her character, but her death scene really hit me for the same reasons. It is written and acted so well. This season also introduced Michonne, and she is one of my favorite characters. I loved her introduction and her relationship with Andrea. I gave pretty much every single episode of this season a 10 out of 10, except for one, which I gave a 9. That is really impressive. Just think about that. You have 16 episodes, and then you have only one below a 10, and none below a 9. It's seemingly impossible, yet they did it, at least for me. I really loved the new settings they introduced. I really loved the prison. I missed them being there so much. I loved how much they appreciated living there, and I loved all the great debates on whether or not they should stay there and fight or leave. I really don't have much more to say about the season. It's really good and I love it.